Hi everyone, welcome. Thanks for coming today. My name's Merrill. I'm the Global Head of Art here at Getty Images.
My name is Rebecca Swift and I'm the Director of Creative Insights at Getty Images. Welcome to the Creative in Focus 2018 webinar. Today we're going to be talking about the visual trends that we have identified for the year ahead. Now, we've been working on visual trends at Getty Images for the last 20 years, and our creative team of visual experts use proprietary data that we generate within our own systems within gettyimages.com and iStock.com. And our trends are backed by this data, and they are analysed by the internal team. And through that, we predict where we feel that visual communication is going in the future.
And this is just to show some of the publications we've been doing to this effect. We've been publishing the Creative in Focus book we're in the 5th edition. These are our 4 previous editions starting in 2014. And then this is our 5th edition from this year. We're really excited to be sharing it. We've done 4 different covers this year to really showcase the variety of content that we work on here at Getty Images. We're really proud of it. And what's also exciting is that all the imagery we're showcasing and talking about this year is royalty-free, which is brilliant. We know our customers are really looking for that.
So if you want any more information after this webinar, please head to the website that's listed on the screen right now, visualtrends.gettyimages.com, where there's more information about everything that we're talking about here. We will be adding more data and more images to this site as time goes on.
So, getting right stuck in. The first trend we wanted to talk to you about today is called Second Renaissance, or Renaissance, depending on where you are. This is about art direction meeting art history. As we say here, it's about celebrating diversity and classical portraiture. And this trend is really about this idea of craftsmanship and looking to the aesthetics of the past. And the visuals we're seeing around this trend are quite contemplative and reminiscent of classical art, and also about redefining stereotypes and championing diversity.
As a result, we're seeing an increase in searches relating to photographic techniques, and we have seen this particularly in portraiture. We've been saying for a while that the global accessibility of photography in terms of using our camera phones to take pictures ourselves has also meant a growth in interest in the craft of photography. And we really saw this showing itself in our customer behaviour in 2017. And it's really interesting how portraiture as a genre goes through its own trends. And as you can see on the screen here, we've seen an increase in the last 12 months of searches for painted portraits. And what we did was we looked at the customer pathway that they took once they'd looked at that idea. And we've seen that what they're actually looking for is a kind of softer portraiture, more reminiscent of film photography. Also important to this trend, we're in an era where brands are focusing on representing diversity and authenticity. So we're now starting to see these traditional techniques being revisited, but being applied to a broader range of people and personalities than perhaps it might have been when it was seen the first time around. So again, on the screen we have we've seen an increase in searches for cultural diversity. And what we're seeing in this trend is this kind of mashup of the old and the new.
So what's really driving this trend? Well, we're seeing this being represented in lots of different ways, partially through social behavior. So we're seeing, obviously things through like these fun selfies, which is obviously selfies are the way we see ourselves or the way we want to see ourselves. But we love how in this iteration, which is just kind of something that went viral on Instagram, it's really a way for people to connect with the past. And then recently, Google Arts and Culture launched their app, which really kind of blew up and everyone was sharing, where you can kind of upload a selfie and match it with a portrait from art history. But what was interesting is that part of this conversation was about how people of color or women had a funny and sometimes quite negative experience of the app. One article even posed the question, is the Google app racist? People found themselves matched with quite stereotypical tropes. Many women, for example, find themselves matched up with kind of sex objects. So a Google spokesperson has said, that they were limited by the images they have on their platform, and they're working hard to kind of bring more diversity to the artwork they have online. So I think this trend is being driven from a lot of different places. I always love to include this example here of Solange, this portrait on the left, which is the cover of her album, A Seat at the Table. She said that she really wanted that the Mona Lisa was the inspiration for this, and with the photographer, they really wanted to capture this stateliness and sternness that the image portrayed, but also with a sense of vulnerability. And I think the younger generation, Gen Z and millennials, are the kind of real drivers behind this trend, because I think what they're doing is they're really looking to repicture icons in a more diverse and inclusive way, such as Solange has done here. Then it's also about young people wanting to educate themselves about visual astuteness. They're looking at art history and those who've gone before them to find inspiration. And there's also a bit of, I think, a reaction against this kind of unfiltered and raw aesthetic, a very kind of real reportage approach that we've seen kind of in a lot of visual communications in the past few years. So it's kind of stepping outside the box of that and trying to stand out with craft and beautiful light and clear art direction. And then I think lastly, it's also about seeking out something familiar and traditional in what are quite anxiety-inducing and chaotic times. So just a few quick examples of what this is looking like. We're seeing this in lots of different places. Like I said, this is an example from fashion. This is from Harper's Bazaar magazine, a great example of redefining the past and making it more present. So this is using famous models and actors who are quite unusual and unexpected in kind of these traditional paintings. And how is this being reflected elsewhere and in less literal ways? Well, I just want to make the point that this trend is bigger than just mimicking art history. It's really about craft and telling a story in a really beautiful, considered way. And we love this campaign from Jigsaw, which is a kind of Main Street clothing store here in the UK. They're not a brand you typically associate with kind of strong messaging or a strong point of view, but this entire campaign was about immigration and the idea that there's no such thing as being 100% British. And their marketing manager said, people don't need another brand showing pretty pictures. You have to make people feel something. Yes, there's a risk people might not agree with the message, but we feel like we have an important position to talk about, and we feel like we're in a position to do so. And the point I really want to make here is that the brand was able to deliver this quite complicated and thought-provoking and controversial message through beautiful and crafted imagery. And just a few examples of what we're working on here at Getty Images to kind of address this trend is one of the big things we're working on is a big recruitment drive in terms of our contributor base. We're really trying to focus on younger photographers of color, and female photographers in particular. And Claudia Marks, who's one of our art directors in New York, has been really active in kind of taking this on and working on this ongoing initiative. She's been attending conferences and workshops, really seeking out photographers and filmmakers to build us out with a more diverse contributor community. We've also repurposed our Creative Bursary, which is an award for emerging photographers, and we've retooled it now to aim at photographers under the age of 30. It's been really exciting to see the entrants that have come through. We've put together a brilliant set of judges to really drive interest to this younger crowd, and we've just announced earlier this year that our first 6 winners who are there on the right, which we're so proud of. And just a bit more from the creative side, also just in terms of how we work with photographers. This is a photographer called Campbell Addy, who we signed last year. He's a young British Ghanaian and openly gay photographer who's really shaking things up in the photographic industry. And one of our art directors here collaborated with him on this project to kind of shoot these beautiful portraits of young people in London, really celebrating faces you don't typically see represented in the media. What's really nice about this is it got picked up and got lots of interesting press and really put us in a nice position to be able to talk about the kinds of photographers we'd like to be working with.
And if you'd like to get to any of this content on our sites, and we recommend the search terms that are listed here. we have collated all of the content that we've showed so far in this presentation under the search term Second Renaissance Trend. So if we just put that into our search box, then you should get all of this imagery up. If you're looking for something a little bit different, then there's just some examples there of the types of search terms that will bring up the images that we've been talking about today.
Rolling right along, the second trend is what we're calling conceptual realism. This is where perfection meets skepticism. We said here photographers are catering to an audience that craves intriguing conceptual imagery executed in a realist style. And the way we see it is it's kind of the next step in the authenticity story.
And there's a few things happening here. Firstly, in a counter trend to what we've just discussed in the first trend, and in a bid to avoid the complications of ensuring that a diverse range of people are featured in imagery, we've seen a trend towards depersonalization and anonymity by using images of people in a non-identifiable but conceptual way, which we'll discuss here. Conceptual images always sell well. We license a lot every year, and there's always a need to bring in more highly conceptual imagery. And what we're doing now and what we're seeing our customers are interested in is this idea of bringing high concept into the real world. What you can see on the screen right now are the search terms that have increased over the last 12 months, but also the search terms that will get you to this type of imagery. And, we really saw this happening in still life especially. I've just mentioned about depersonalization of people, but we've also seen still life and object imagery being used in this conceptual and often humorous way. And it now means that we're working with our community of contributors to create still life and object imagery that is in situ, whereas perhaps in the past we would have concentrated that shooting into the studio.
So again, where are we seeing this reflected? Again, we like to look at social behavior. Another thing that was kind of trending on social media, which we all love and couldn't get enough of. I don't know what we call it, but obviously where people kind of find themselves matching up with an inanimate object. It's a really fun, playful trend, and I think it really just gives a sense of what this conceptual realism is all about. It really is rooted in the real world. This trend is also really being driven by photographers and image creators. This is a photographer called Ben Zank, who we really admire, who's doing similar work but in a kind of higher end manner. He creates these really surreal and cultivated moments. And his work has this playfulness to it, but it's crafted. But it's crafted, but it's not contrived at the same time, which is kind of the magic sweet spot here. And again, you can see here this depersonalization, like Rebecca was mentioned, where the people's faces are obscured or turned away from the camera. Another example here, Jimmy Marble, with the way he plays with people. The way I see it is that people often become kind of props in the frame. Jimmy's based in LA, and he's shot these campaigns for TK Maxx and Cotton. But again, he's using color in a really conceptual way to tell a story which kind of really stands apart. Another advertising example, this is from Der Tagesspiegel. I can't say it very well, but this garnered a lot of attention at Cannes for its simplicity and the way it was executed in such a clear but kind of clever way. And what's fun about this one is there's kind of this debate about whether or not this ad was made, was conceptualized this way, or there's also, there are also some versions of it online that look like they were just kind of caught, like at the train station or at the newsstand. So again, it's this blending of kind of what is kind of happened in reality and what is kind of conceived. And one last great example here from VW last year, shot in this really lovely snapshot aesthetic. It feels like it's the kind of stuff you kind of snap of your kids on your phone. It feels really loose and it's honest, but obviously it's very set up and art directed, and there's a very considered palette. And it's just that perfect combination of naivety and humor, but shot in a way that's very aware of the composition and the story it needs to tell. And so what we're doing on our end is, we're looking for photographers who shoot in this style. We love this photographer called Ariel Bob Willis, who's a 23-year-old African-American photographer based in the South in the States. Her photographs are this joyful concoction of colors and bodies and shapes. Again, you see the depersonalization thing. And she puts them together in ways that are really inspired by abstract art.
And again, as with the last trend, there's a number of search terms that will get you closer to this content. If you use the keyword conceptual realism trend, you'll see the imagery that we've shown you in the last few slides. But it's also worth thinking about how to combine the subject matters that you're looking for with the words such as conceptual, humour, offbeat, or concept and quirky, to bring you something that perhaps might not come up in a general search.
And finally, the last and quite big trend comes from the growing focus on really repicturing what it means to be a man. We're calling it masculinity undone. This is about breaking stereotypes and showing the complexity, vulnerability, and emotional side of masculinity.
And we've talked about the visualization of women for well over 10 years now, and we started talking about it as the female rising. It's been a central theme in all of our content development over the last 5 years especially. And part of our job in my team in Creative Insights is examining patterns in image usage. And the top sellers are usually a good indication of how imagery is evolving. And you can see on the screen now how the top-selling female image has evolved in the last 10 years. So we firmly believe in not only creating content that our customers want, but also taking on the responsibility as the biggest visual content agency in the world of leading the discussion on repicturing old cliches. In 2015, we further investigated gender when we talked about our the gender blend trend. And in 2017, so in last year's trend report, we looked at how the depiction of women had been influenced by the Olympics and the need to show a more gritty depiction of the female. And this year, we have spent time looking at how we could possibly be involved in the way that men are pictured and repictured. And as our voices become stronger, we've embarked on partnerships to further this mission and to further this objective and improve our content and amplify our view. So some of those partnerships are on the screen now. Obviously, Leaning was the first one that we got involved in over 4 years ago, and then more recently, Muslim Girl and Refinery 29 are helping us change the visual language. And as I say, we are further committed to changing how the stereotypes around men are depicted. And what you see here is 10 years of top sellers of images of men, and you can see how that has changed and become a more caring, collaborative relationship with children as a parent over that period. And in terms of how our customers are searching for men, we've seen an increase in interest in images of single fathers, so fathers who are parenting alone, gay parents who are co-parenting their children. And then, as relates to this search, men doing meditation, traditionally yoga and meditation and mindfulness has been very female-oriented, and that's very much represented in the visual language. And we're seeing now that there's much more interest in depicting men in this way.
So what are the stereotypes that are pervasive in the media? These are the 5 that we kind of came up with. I'm sure there are many more, but you see the tough guy, the rebel. You see that a lot in beer ads or cologne ads maybe. The buffoon, typified here by Homer, the kind of typically a bumbling dad who doesn't know his way around the household. The hero, which is often an athlete, which is pretty ubiquitous. One of our favorites is the lonely guy with the car who seems to have no friends and doesn't need any friends. And then kind of hunk-vertising, the men being kind of basically their abs. What don't we see? That's what I think is interesting. We don't see men who are part of a community. We don't see men with average bodies. We don't see men who are emotionally astute. We don't see men who can be caregivers.
And, in terms of our searches, we've seen an increase in searches for fathers and sons talking. And, this along with an increase in searches for men and mindfulness is all about taking care of mental health and psychological well-being. And that, there is a global interest in male mental health. And the question that we keep returning to within our own department is, how do you represent mental health visually? And in order to address this situation and to get to a solution, we've partnered with a number of organisations, SANE, CALM and Time to Change, to repicture mental health and to start building a collection that is approved by the Mental Health Association. So we've run various competitions and with our community and with the general public to create new and more relevant content and we will continue to do that this year. What you can see on the screen now is some stills actually from the Links campaign, the Links for Men ad campaign, which the headline is it okay for guys too? Which really interesting, complete change of branding for this brand that was very much associated with the stereotypes of masculinity. Now has been doing some research into how men are asking questions of the internet, and that there are questions such as, is it okay for guys to cry? The kind of the softer side of being a male in today's modern world.
And just another example here from Gillette, another brand you typically associate with kind of, the stereotypes of masculinity. They made this lovely kind of commercial stroke short film about this New Jersey man who was looking after his elderly father. His elderly father is this really big personality who suffered a stroke and could no longer do the most basic daily tasks like shaving. And in the ad, we see this amazing connection between him, his father, and his own son as well. So there's this three-generational thing. It's incredibly touching, and it's like a really surprising move showing these clearly very tough men being thoughtful, emotional, vulnerable, and caring. And what's really nice about it is it all links into this new razor that Gillette are launching, which is the first ever razor designed for assisted shaving for caregivers who are shaving people who've lost the ability to shave themselves. And just to give a sense of some of the projects we get involved in to this end, this is a project from a photographer here in London we love called Rosie Matheson. It's a project she's called Boys, Boys, Boys. And it's just really about exploring masculinity. Rosie says of this project that she was interested in photographing men as they have this mixture of outrageous confidence or strength alongside this big sense of vulnerability. She said, I'm interested in targeting the pressures that men have in society, the feeling that they have to portray themselves as super masculine. And this is an ongoing project that she's working on with us that we're really proud of.
And again, if you'd like to see some of the images that we've shown in this presentation around the masculinity trends, they're all available under the keyword masculinity undone trends. We've also been working on this for a number of years through our Leaning collection, and if you can either look in the Leaning collection, use the keyword, and then add terms such as father or male to get to those images. And as we said earlier, if you'd like some more information about everything we've spoken about today, it is available on visualtrends.gettyimages.com. And that's it for us.
Lovely, thank you.
Thank you very much for listening, and we're now going to hand over to our presenters who will take any questions.